But the reason that Matt asked me to come on today is really to talk about, the things that help, at least that I've seen, and I've been doing this for 22 years, that separate the successful people from the people who just don't make it. So let's just start with some basic stuff, right? Let's be 100% real and transparent, right? Every single one of you, including me, we all got into real estate for the same reason, right? It was to make more money, right? To have more freedom and to have less stress. So whether you're wholesaling or you're building rental portfolio, like that's the dream. That's why we all did this. But here's the problem, right? Most investors, including me, we end up working harder in our business than we ever did at our 9 to 5, and sometimes making less money than we should, right? We're not growing it as fast as we wanted to, or what we felt like we would be at, like at the end of a year or 6 months, we're just not there. And that's because we get stuck in the weeds. Right? In the weeds of getting deals across the finish line. And that's exactly where we come in and why, Matt invited us to come in and present to you today because our mission, it's right there on the screen, right? We want to help you to work less and to make more money starting today. So let's talk about what is transaction coordination, right? I will be real. When I first started out, I just knew dealing with title stuff was part of the process, right? I wasn't really great at it. I just sort of muddled through it because that's what investors were supposed to do, right? That's what we did. Somebody in the beginning here was talking about stacking lists, right? Well, we get these properties with just a ton of different problems, and I thought the title company handled everything, right? There were these title companies that are like, we help investors. And I'm like, oh, that's great. That's what I needed. But in reality, right, what was really happening is I was just basically their unpaid assistant. Every time there was a missing document or a seller they couldn't reach or a death certificate or a trust document or an error in the paperwork or some weird lien, right? They didn't fix it. They were kicking it back to me to handle. Right. And I would be out there scrambling, stopping what I'm doing. I'm trying to take care of it. And I'm thinking, well, but I at least I've got an investor friendly title company, like whatever that means, right? This just must be how it works. Because yeah, they were investor friendly and they said they would do an assignment, but that doesn't mean they were doing all of these other things, right? And here's what I didn't realize back then. Like this was not how it had to be. This is exactly what a transaction coordinator was. And this is why I needed it so badly. So here's the simplest way to think about it, right? A transaction coordinator they're like a project manager for your deal, right? But let's even be like, this is the fall, football season's just starting. So if you're like a wholesaler or an investor, think of yourself like this. You're the team owner. Just don't be Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. If you guys want to hate on me, throw that in the comments. But like you're the one out there building the business, right? Scouting the deals, making the big moves, but on the field, right? Out where the action is happening, you need that quarterback, somebody who's dodging the sacks and calling the plays and moving the ball down forward. That ball is your deal, right? You want to make sure the deal actually gets over the finish line. That's when you score. That person, that's your transaction coordinator, right? So the TC, your transaction coordinator, they're like the conductor or the ringleader for your deal, right? From the time the contract is signed until the day it closes, they're the ones making sure that all of the moving parts, they stay on track, right? The seller, the buyer, the attorney, the lender, the agents, so you don't have to, right? In my business, I got the deal and then I handed it off to my TC and I was able to out here keep moving, right? To keep stacking contracts, to keep doing my marketing. And Heather, my TC at the time, who's now the COO of all my companies, she was in charge of making them close. And once I finally made that shift, right? Once I finally got that through my thick head, because I wasn't smart enough to outsource when people told me to, that's when I stopped drowning in details, right? That's when I bought back my time and I actually started scaling my business and not just scaling. That's when it skyrocketed. And, when we kind of back up and look at a deal, like I love this graphic because every deal you do is basically you're in this machine, right? On one side you've got buyers and sellers and lenders and agents, right? But on the other side you got the opposing team, right? You've got title and attorneys and earnest money and HUD review, but in the middle, right? In the middle you've got the contracts and deadlines and communication and paperwork. So here's the reality: even when one of those gears slips, right? The whole machine, it just grinds to a halt. The seller can disappear, right? Or a title finds a lien, or the buyer gets cold feet, or contract is missing a signature, and suddenly Like that gear, that engine, it just seizes up. And instead of going out and doing new deals, you're stuck trying to force this machine back into motion. You're back in the engine room with that big metal pipe trying to grind it and make the gears start going. This is why you need a transaction coordinator, right? Because a TC sits in the middle, right, and keeps it all turning, right? They're the ones making sure that the gears are lubed and they stay aligned and the machine doesn't break down and your deal actually makes it to the finish line. Because here's the truth. If you don't have a TC, you are the person back there. You're the one running the machine, right? And if you're out chasing paperwork and juggling calls and babysitting title companies, right? This is why you get burned out. This is what happened to me. This was a problem. This is why I could never scale past 2 or 3 deals a month, because doing one is okay and doing two is okay. And you think because I can do three that I can do 10. Well, I promise you, you can't do 10 by yourself. It's just not, it's not reasonable. There's only so many hours in the day. Math and science tell us there's only 24 hours in the day. But when you put a TC in the middle, right, suddenly that machine, it's running the way it's supposed to, right? Because somebody's paying attention to it all the time. And you get to go out and focus on doing deals, selling those deals and building your business. We promised that we would get into real problems and issues that I personally went through on my road to over 1,600 deals. And here's the brutal truth, right? Money is not made when you sign the contract. It's actually made when you close. That's when the wire hits. That's when the money goes into Hip National Bank, right? Right into your pocket. And between those 2 points, it's literally a path of landmines, right? Sometimes it's a bad document or a contract or right, some missing form or a forgotten signature, and suddenly your deal, it's teetering on the brink, or maybe it isn't even legal. Like I have seen six-figure deals evaporate over a single unchecked box or just some crappy contract that they got from some bad Facebook guru, right? It's terrible, right? And poor communication. My gosh. One thing that we instituted in our company long before we ever started this one was we talk to the seller every single week because I don't want that seller to get nervous. I don't want them to ghost me, right? Or maybe you were dealing with an agent and they're stopping, not answering calls, right? Or buyers are wondering what's going on because they haven't heard from anybody and title takes 3 days to respond and deals just they seem to die in silence, right? Time kills all deals. These things have an expiration date on them and we have to get them closed just as fast as possible. And then, my goodness, just delays from bad expectations or title issues. And, how many of you have heard this, right? Like title's like, yeah, I'll check on it and get back to you. You know darn well, like that paper is just going to the bottom of their inbox or it's going to the bottom of the files on their desk because they've got other easier, probably more profitable deals that they're going to work on. And meanwhile, in the background, your buyer's like, I haven't heard from anybody. They get cold feet and they want to go get a different deal, or somebody else has called your seller and they're ready to close quicker because every day of a delay, that's a risk, right? And what are we risking? These are big assignment fees. This isn't chump change that we're talking about. We got into this business for a reason, right? So beyond that, this is something I struggled with myself, not having a well-trained team. If you're trying to handle all of it yourself, right? Or even worse, you're relying on someone who doesn't know how, at least in transactions, right? They don't know how to navigate liens or probate or last minute buyer changes, or, a seller who's in, South Africa, right? And this stuff happens. You're gambling with your file. Right. And here's the worst thing. The worst thing that you could do, like you shouldn't be doing it yourself. You should outsource it. But the worst thing that you can do is hire some, virtual assistant who doesn't know what they're doing from some third world country for pennies, thinking you're going to save money and thinking that they are going to protect your $50,000 assignment deal. Like that's crazy. You're better off doing it yourself. Don't hire me, do it yourself. Maybe you only do one deal a month, but you're better off, right? And then the hardest thing. This was the biggest struggle that I had when I started going virtual and going into other markets, and that was finding a title company or an attorney that actually understood investor deals because not all title companies are the same. Not all of them want to deal with our nonsense, right? We were talking here before we started about stacking lists. So when I was here in Chattanooga, I had this one title agent that I dealt with all the time. Her name was Patty. And I don't know how many of you have ever heard this, but she would call me after a closing and be like, David, where do you find these people? These people are crazy, right? But that's who we do. That's what we do as investors, right? We're out here trying to help people who, need an option other than just putting it on the retail market on MLS. but they're typically people with some issues, right? It's not always the house that's distressed. Sometimes it's the sellers, right? So most title companies, they're built for the three R's: retail, refinance, and realtors, right? They're very easy, simple deals, low risk. We bring high risks. Title companies, they move slow. They don't get creative on how to solve the deals, and they certainly don't love sub two deals and novations and all of that stuff. They don't understand our urgency, right? That we need to get these deals closed because we promised the seller that we would solve this problem before the foreclosure date, right? And here's the kicker, right? Instead of fixing these problems, they kick it back to you, right? I see investors all the time who think, geez, I've got an investor-friendly title company, but still they're working their butt off to solve these problems, or even worse, even people in this group, right? What's the best title company, and insert this state, right? Or this city. When in reality, here's what you want. You just want one point of contact, somebody that you can just take your deal, say, hey, take this and get it done, right? And just know that it's going to close. That's what we're here to fix for you today. Because the truth is, any one of these is enough to kill your deal, right? And if you're stuck trying to juggle all of this, you're not running a business. You're a fireman and you're running out there putting out fires. So this is what we're up against in this business. Like, this is not pretend. These are things that we deal with every day on behalf of our clients. Like I said, every deal looks simple at first. I'm going to sign the contract. It's going to go to closing. But in reality, these are the things, right? Title gets the wrong version of a contract, or it's not sent in on time, right? Or addendums never get signed. Sellers are ghosting you. Buyers, their lender backed out at the last minute. Oh my God, what are we going to do? EMD was never received, and now we don't even know that we have a real buyer, or funds are delayed, or title finds some surprise lien, or there's missing heirs, right? Or the LLC docs never came in and we can't close. Or my God, the weirdest one, like sometimes somebody's in prison. That happens so much. Once a week, we're solving a deal with somebody in prison, right? Or somebody's in foreclosure, like I talked about earlier, 72 hours to foreclosure. We need to stop this right now, right? Or the property's in a tax auction or was bought at a tax auction. What do you do? Right? Incorrect legal descriptions or a property address. A lot of you do land. Have you done something that's like 0 Main Street? Like, it's not even been assigned a darn address. What do you do? Like, what am I selling? Right? Memorandums that have been filed or need to be filed or sometimes need to be removed. And please tell me in the comments if you've ever had the emotional seller, right? Who needs to talk to you 4 times every single day from the day you first talked to them until the day you closed and maybe after, right? And then scheduling conflicts. Sometimes getting everybody to closing, it's like herding cats on crack, right? You just cannot get them all there. Remote closings and tight timelines. And that's a Wednesday in our office. This is what we do every single day for you guys. Because again, any one of these things, boom, they can blow up your deal. And most of you, because there's a lot of very active investors in here, you've probably fought through at least 3 or 4 of these in the last year, maybe in the last 30 days. So the real question is, are you the one putting out all these fires, or do you have a transaction coordinator in place making sure that none of these things derail your closing? Because here's where it really hurts, right? When you don't have the right people in your corner, every mistake turns into lost trust, right? Lost trust means people don't show up at closing, right? And that means leads to lost revenue and lost deals, right? And that means you can't scale, right? Because you're buried doing too much of it yourself. Closings get delayed, right? Things get pushed off. Now your buyer's frustrated. Your seller's angry because they needed this close so they could buy their next house, whatever it is, right? And that's dead momentum. That is literally, you're stuck in the sand on the beach up to your knees and you can't move. And that assignment fee that was coming in, that was going to fund your next round of marketing, gone, right? And now what do you do? All right. And those missed opportunities, they happen because you were stuck chasing paperwork and somebody else is out there getting that next contract, right? That next person on the list that you were going to call, somebody else called. And that's how you lose these deals. And when all this starts happening, this is when mistakes creep in, right? And those mistakes don't just cost you money. Maybe they damage your reputation and that seller or that buyer never wants to deal with you again. And once one deal starts going sideways, people start whispering that maybe you don't know what you're doing. And then your own doubt creeps in, right? Is real estate, is this a real thing? Can I do it? Should I go back to my job? No. Let's make this a scalable, repeatable business. Simple is scalable. Let's simplify things as much as possible. Because at the end of the day, right? All of these things can cause you to just flat out lose deals. Lost deals is lost revenue. And here's the bottom line. Every mistake is a potential loss, right? Of not just revenue, but trust. And we don't want that.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Machine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.